Hi, my name is the Duffer Brothers in 2016, and I've decided that I'm going to make a really good TV show. But as a funny prank, I'm going to make the last season bad. That way, months after everyone has stopped caring, a YouTuber can make a video about how and why these TV shows fail, using my show as a leading example. Man, I bet whoever makes that video is gonna be so stupid and ugly.
And nobody will even like him at all.
What the hell?
That he has an
This
ugly
isn't the
face
Duffer
and a weird
Brothers.
nose.
This is me. I just recorded this a few seconds ago. Guinos, I'm tired of getting invested in TV shows that turn out bad. I think that society would be better off if all of these people working at the bad TV show factory started instead working at the good TV show factory. But apparently the bad TV show factory has dental, so we're just gonna have to deal with it. This has happened way too many times in my life. Getting invested in a show that's being made and it turning out bad, or beginning as bad, even though I was hyped to see it. So I wanted to bring up a few examples to illustrate why this happens and why it keeps happening, rather than just complaining about them. Although I am still going to complain about them. Also, I'm going to be spoiling these shows, so if you wanted to go watch them unspoiled, you should go do that now. But chances are if you clicked on this video, you do not care about that. Yeah, that's right. I know how you think, because I do exactly the same thing. So I started watching Stranger Things with my sisters when I was just 11 years old, which is why it is so disappointing that it ended up the way that it did. I can admit that I was overly critical of things that were popular around that time, especially Stranger Things. Season 3 came out around the time that I was growing my contrarian bone, which meant that I was an obnoxious teenage boy that thought everything that was popular was automatically bad. However, after avoiding it and insisting that I didn't like it for a long time, my sisters finally sat my ass down and made me watch season 4. And I gotta be real, for the most part that shit was flames. Here's a quick rundown of how I feel about every season of the show. Like most people, I think season 1 is really damn good. The characters feel really grounded, a lot of focus is put on relationships between them and how they react to the events around them, and in my opinion, every character is distinct and complex. It ends with a lot of loose ends untied, which is great for a show like this. It keeps you thinking about it for a long time afterwards. There is a bad way to do this, which miraculously, Stranger Things is also not a stranger to. More like familiar things. That's not a good fucking joke. The second season is also pretty great, and honestly, I didn't mind the little X-Men detour. I know most people don't like the episode, but it's fine, it's like a training arc. Max is added to the group, and she's a great addition. Hopper is fantastic in this season, and I like everybody else. I love the bond between Dustin and Steve especially. Although this is definitely when you can start to feel the power creep of this series. To keep people interested, the threat for this season is bigger and more menacing, and Eleven has to point her hand at it and scream at it even louder this time. It's still a really solid season of television overall. I really like the Mind Flayer as a concept. The third season is where the cracks start to show, at least in my opinion, and probably the opinion of everybody else on the internet. The Upside Down is back! The Mind Flayer is back! And now there are also Russians controlling a secret underground facility beneath the town's new shopping mall. This is a big problem with horror franchises in general. As they go on for long enough, they start to become more action or thriller oriented. Once you've revealed too much of the mystery of this threat, you can't ride the fear that you've stoked in your original installments. In this case, it's not as horrifying to see the Upside Down again, or the Mind Flayer, and then adding Russians to the mix just makes it feel a bit silly. It just seems like they wanted to keep raising the stakes, and this is just not the way to do it. I enjoy some parts of it, but a lot of these characters have started to change in ways that don't fit their past seasons of growth. Hopper especially, it feels like he just regresses into a man baby in this season, which is unfortunate because he's one of the best characters in the first 2 seasons. Additionally, he should definitely be dead at the end of the season, considering the fact that he gets shot with the beam of evil that obliterates you. These guys get fucking vaporized! But apparently, ducking out of the way is enough to negate its effects. The Russian mind simply cannot comprehend ducking out of the way of the atom beam. Also, I like Robin. She is pretty cool. Like I said before, I actually like Season 4. It goes back to being more about weirdly incomprehensible threats, but it also humanizes them in the form of Vecna. The sound design is also particularly good in this season. I love the sounds that play when Vecna is about to attack somebody. It feels like pure auditory dread. It is so cool. Honestly, hats off to the guys who made this one sound effect. Great job. There are some quippy Marvel-style moments in this season, but I think it's mostly fine, and the stakes are raised considerably in a way that isn't just the Upside Down is back or there are Russians in our basement. The characters are also given a really good reason to care about them, because one of their friends is now framed for all of these murders that they know are being done by some supernatural force. I like that we actually see Max dealing with the loss of her brother. The characters have rifts between them that make sense for high school students, and at the very end of the season, when the Earth is fucking breaking apart, you legitimately feel that weight. Eddie dies, Max is pretty much dead, and they failed to stop Vecna. Sure, it's a little over the top in some places, and they definitely did not have to go to Russia, but overall, this season and the characters stay pretty likable. The plot itself is intriguing enough. It really feels like they're going somewhere with this. Oh man, I'm invested now. I can't wait to see what they do with all of this cool setup. Season 5, in my opinion, illustrates the problems that have always been there in Stranger Things. They just weren't as apparent as they are now. There are quite a few, but I feel like they boil down to something I'm going to call a refusal to commit. For example, Stranger Things Season 5 brings back every single character of all of the past seasons. Which, to be fair, is not unheard of. It is the last season of the show. People want to see the conclusions to these characters. I'm gonna list them out, and I promise, there is a point to be made here. It includes 11, Mike, Lucas, Dustin, Will, Max, Erica, Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, Robin, Vicky, Hopper, Joyce, and Murray. A lot of other side characters play a bigger role in this season as well, like Karen Wheeler, or whatever the fucking science teacher's name was. I can't be bothered to look it up right now. Just kidding, it's Mr. Clark. I did look it up. Fuck you. I'm sorry. I didn't really mean that. I didn't really mean to say that. I just didn't want to look up his name is all. I'm sure I missed a few, but just counting the main characters, that's 15 pretty important people. From the way the Duffers were talking about this season, saying that it was gonna evoke the same emotions as the Battle of the Bastards from Game of Thrones, which here's a clip of that. I think it's pretty reasonable that people thought that shit was going to go down. Characters were about to fucking die. After they cut through the planet like butter, I was expecting there to be like a bloodbath. I braced myself for an emotional ride because these characters that I cared about, that I grew up with, were going to eat dirt. Instead, this season starts a year and a half after that, with things being surprisingly calm. Seems like they didn't want to commit to the ending that they gave us in Season 4. There's gonna be a lot of me making that joke for the next maybe 10 minutes. This is part of my first point, a refusal to making their threats actual threats. To preface, plot armor is a real and useful thing in narratives. Sometimes you have important characters that you want to survive, and so you have to come up with reasons that make sense for their survival. Like when a rock falls next to someone's head instead of on top of it. It's a narrative. You don't want them to die by a falling rock. This is just how writing works, and to some degree, it's up to the viewer to suspend their disbelief and allow the story to take place. Within reason. I don't think Stranger Things does a particularly good job of doing this. For example, it kind of takes me out of the tension of a scene and makes me feel like your monsters aren't threatening when they're shown to tear through the military and tank bullets just to give the main characters 5 to 6 business days before they do anything. It's okay, buddy, take your time. It's alright. You'll get there when you feel like it. The same goes for damage being dealt to the antagonists. Why is it that they seem to get hurt whenever the main characters are shooting at them, but not when the literal fucking US military is shooting at them? Does the Hawkins crew have legendary weapons? Did they find gold scars? Speaking of the military, they let these kids get away with murder, including actually fucking murder. I'm not saying that they should shoot and kill our main characters, but I am saying that it doesn't make sense when our main characters shoot at them and they don't do anything about it. I should feel worried for them when a threat that's supposed to be imposing shows up on screen, but the show doesn't earn it. And to be honest, I don't usually mind stuff like this. The series has done this a lot before. They put on kid gloves whenever they're dealing with the main characters. It makes it less entertaining to watch, but ultimately it's not that big of a deal on its own. They're allowed to decide that their characters are going to survive the events of their show. I am not the boss of them. A bunch of people dying in a show doesn't automatically make it good. The problem with this stems from the fact that they kept telling people that that's exactly what they were going to do. They kept talking about how brutal and serious this season was going to be, and then it just wasn't. Are you just allowed to lie about what your series is going to be like? I mean, I guess. It's not very cool, but I guess you can do that. But then you have to come to terms with the fact that your threats are no longer threatening, and the stakes holding down your tent of a plot are made of cardboard instead of wood, and now that shit is going to blow away and you're about to get eaten by a bear. I wrote that? What kind of fucking metaphor is that? Number 2, a refusal to commit to characters. I would not care as much about this whole plot issue if the show was still fun to watch, but unfortunately, it is not. Because they don't commit to the development that these characters have previously gone through, or to developing them further. And honestly, how could they? There are so many of them. Seriously, is this like wallpaper bait? This looks like a Subspace Emissary character select screen. There's no time for everybody to have development, so most of these characters have just been changed into quip machines, especially Robin, who, for whatever reason, has just been turned into a caricature. I felt like I was losing my mind. It's either a quip or exposition. A quip or exposition. It's crazy. This has been a problem throughout the series, where at the beginning of a season, they will undevelop characters so they can retread ground in a slightly different way. But now it's more obvious in season 5 because there are way too many people here. It also makes the fact that they don't end up killing any of them off, including the side characters, extremely perplexing. Because of all of this, it feels like there are negative stakes. We're not losing characters, we just keep gaining them, and we can't learn too much about any of them because then there'd be no time for the main plot. This final season just shows off how much of a problem this character bloat has been for the entire series. Off of the top of my head, I can think of maybe one character that wasn't killed in the same season that they were introduced in. That's just not economical for a horror story that's trying to make its otherworldly threat feel powerful and imposing, while also trying to make its characters interesting and unique. Part of me thinks this is because the characters are one of the biggest reasons why people love Stranger Things. So, the Duffers decided they were just not going to get rid of any of the fan favorites, which is pretty much all of them. So nothing fucking happens, and then everybody becomes a caricature of the fandom's favorite traits. They had the audacity to give us not one, but 2 clearly fake out death scenes in this final episode. There's a black screen when Steve falls off of the tower, and then Hopper accidentally shoots Eleven, and it's just like, do you think I'm stupid? Do you think you got me with this? Do you think I'm a baby without object permanence? It is an insult to the viewer's time and intelligence to pretend that you have the balls to give these characters any real shit to deal with. The 2 character deaths we do get in the season finale that were supposed to knock our socks off are Callie, who was just reintroduced a few episodes ago after being MIA for the rest of the series, and Eleven, who isn't even definitively dead. I guarantee that her death was made ambiguous, so sometime in the future, if they want to revisit it, they can make a new series of Stranger Things. And that brings me to my final point. Why do they refuse to commit to anyone having consequences for anything that happens throughout the show? They beat the final boss in less time than it took me to get bored with this episode. 11, quote, dies to close the upside, and then I guess the military just goes, drat. Well, I guess we'll get her next time. Alright, boys, let's pack it up and get out of here. And then nobody except Mike seems to care about the fact that one of their best friends just died. Hopper, the man who has trauma related to his daughter dying from something outside of his control, the man who begged 11 not to kill herself, who lived through a horrific vision of shooting her dead, does not seem to care that his daughter died. Alright, show, this is a fence-sitting finale. Ooh, did 11 die or not? I don't know. Did that Nancy, Steve, and Jonathan love triangle get figured out? I don't know. What happened to the military after our main characters mowed them down? I don't know. Why should I care about your story if you don't care enough to give it a proper ending? If you don't care enough to figure out how your story goes? This is not some artistic decision like Inception. This is just bad storytelling and a refusal to commit to any of their ideas. It's the rare occasion where a finale turns out so bad that the fan base starts fantasizing about a secret other final episode that's actually good. This has only happened a few times, but every time it does, it is the funniest thing in the world. Guys, don't worry. It was bad on purpose. There's a secret, really good final episode that'll explain it away. Don't worry, guys. I personally think that this ending taints the rest of the series. It shows that they never really grew out of their habits of world building and character development in the earlier seasons of the show. And once you've seen it, you'll see the seeds of it in the earlier seasons. It's impossible to ignore. They don't commit to keeping characters dead multiple times over multiple seasons. They don't commit to the development that they've given many of these characters, especially Hopper, and they couldn't commit to one idea of how their eldritch threat worked. Did they make him collect kids just because? What was that about? What was that for? This is a show that took 9 years to make. For reference, it started during the Obama administration. Here's a picture of the cast with Barack Obama. This is crazy to me. Let me be clear, I used to like this show, but I honestly cannot see myself revisiting it, at least for a little while, but probably never. It took 9 years and they couldn't commit to any of the interesting ideas that they developed because they are here, which is why it's so severely disappointing to see them go nowhere. Anyways, I just have one more gripe, John the Duffer Brothers, if that's even your real name. Calling Will a sorcerer was stupid as fuck. He would obviously be a warlock. That was such an easy layup, you posers. Make sure to sync your audio for this next bit. Anybody that was around when this show was first coming out remembers the immense cultural impact it had. Every other show would have an episode or parody dedicated to it. It was genuinely crazy. Even I, as a child, knew the Game of Thrones theme. Granted, it was likely because of the Minecraft villager version of it, but I digress. And somehow, after all of that, after those last seasons, nothing. Nobody talks about this show now other than to dunk on it, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm just contributing. Those last 2 seasons ruined any impact this show had, which is genuinely crushing to me, even as somebody who has watched it so long after the fact. It's so widely known that even if you haven't seen it, you know that it's bad. They didn't just shit the bed. They shit the everything. They shit the all of it. If you haven't watched Game of Thrones, I apologize if some of this is going to be confusing to you. It is a long-ass show, and I just don't have time to summarize 70 hours of television for you. And to be honest, I don't think that would be particularly interesting, and it's not really relevant to what I'm trying to talk about. Which is, of course, how a show gets to this point. A Song of Ice and Fire is pretty long in its own right, so it makes sense that a TV adaptation would need a lot of time to adapt it. The first 6 seasons each have about 10 episodes, which may not seem like a lot at first until you realize that they're all about an hour in length, and each season is in total about 9 hours. It is still, honestly, an incredible feat that a show of this scale, with 9 hours of content coming out each year, was on air yearly for as long as it was. Unfortunately, when they ran out of story from the books, this proved unsustainable. Most people are now aware of the fact that the showrunners, nicknamed D&D, thought that George R.R. Martin would be done with the books by the time that they ran out of material to use. That's completely fair, but I don't know why that translates to it taking 15 years and he still hasn't released the next book in his series, but honestly, I kind of understand. All I write is YouTube video scripts, and this shit took me forever. On its own, this is not a bad thing. They had proven that they put a lot of care and thought into the world that they were building, and so it made sense that they would need an extra year or two to come up with the conclusion. They wanted it to be satisfying and impactful, so they needed the extra time, even if they did have notes from George R.R. Martin himself. However, not only were these seasons taking longer to write, they were also much shorter in length. Season 7 was 7 episodes long, and Season 8 was 6. That was just not nearly enough time to wrap up everything that they had been setting up for the rest of the show. In just one season, they were going to have to wrap up the White Walkers plot, Jon Snow's lineage, Daenerys and her invasion of King's Landing, and much more. That's already a lot for 10 episodes, and they had shortened it to 6, which is almost half of what all previous seasons had been. On top of that, many agree that the ending was simply botched. Again, it's unimportant to the point I'm making, but you could theoretically see where this ending was coming from. Daenerys had always been a bit vicious and stern in the way that she rules, so ending the show with her succumbing to the lust for power and becoming what she hates, while predictable, isn't a bad choice in my mind. The way they get there and the consequences they face afterwards, however, are bad choices. It's like they asked a YouTuber to summarize their script, and then they just filmed whatever they wrote instead. So how exactly did this happen? With Stranger Things, the Duffers were given an ample amount of time to make their dream season of television, and they just didn't. They refused to commit to their interesting ideas, and they seemed uninterested in making their characters develop any further than they had already developed them. While there is some of this in Game of Thrones, I feel like the culprit here is a lot more common. Greed. Oh, and time also. And if we're being perfectly honest, probably incompetence too. Sound the alarms, everybody. Another thing is ruined by the relentless need for more capital. But why? And who did it, I guess? Who's mainly responsible? A number of people online seem to think that Game of Thrones' final season was ruined for a couple of reasons, with the main one being that D&D were rushing through it to get to the Star Wars movies they were slated to be working on. I can see why, since the first of those was meant to release in 2022, with filming starting in 2019. That's also when the final season of Game of Thrones came out. This isn't an impossible thing to put together. In fact, I'd argue that it isn't dumb at all to believe it. And I'm not just saying that because I also believed it for the longest time. The truth is a lot more complicated. A lot of the time on the internet, we tend to boil the failure of something down to the most enticing sounding reason. Whatever makes for the best thumbnail or title, it's probably why the Star Wars story is so widely believed. Look at that! These idiot showrunners ruined the last season of their hit TV show because they were rushing to do Star Wars instead. Serves them right that got cancelled and they can't do that either. This just isn't the case. D&D were already having problems with their Star Wars storyline, since Lucasfilm wasn't really wanting to do a First Jedi movie like they had pitched. However, it did seem like D&D were ready to wrap up Game of Thrones sooner than everybody else. This makes a lot of sense when, in 2019, they actually scored a $200 million exclusivity deal with Netflix, right as the season had come to an end. Does that mean that Netflix was the true culprit? In my eyes, not entirely. These guys had already told HBO and the public that they were planning on Game of Thrones being about 70 hours of content. They said this all the way back in 2015, right after Season 5 had finished and a year before Season 6 had even come out. This was the original plan, and in my eyes, this is why the show was set up to fail. Don't get me wrong, the first 5 seasons of the show are absolutely incredible. They did a great job adapting these books into television. Credit where credit is due, it is a fantastic show up to that point. However, just because you're good at adapting a book for the screen does not automatically mean that you are good at making shit up when you have to. Season 6 is a bit of a decline, but 7 and 8 really show this. The reason Season 6 is not as clear of a decline is because this is where George R.R. Martin had given them the most material that they had to work with. It's rough around the edges, but at its core, it's still a pretty good season. I honestly wouldn't have noticed that they weren't adapting from the books anymore. I would have just thought it was like late show fatigue. Season 7, on the other hand, is all over the place. You can tell that they are struggling to fill these gaps. There are less episodes, characters are moving around the world like crazy. You can feel the fact that the writers were given major plot points that they have to hit, and they are just scrambling to figure out what to put in between. We need to get Jon and Daenerys on the same team, so let's have Jon find some cave drawings and move on. Jorah needs to be cured of grayscale, so it happens in just a couple scenes. We need Cersei to help with the war against the White Walkers. Let's teleport to the other side of the continent and bring a zombie back so that she can see it. Martin says Incest Man is supposed to have a change of heart, so he's suddenly abandoning his toxic relationship with his sister to help against the White Walkers. These things happen because they weren't given enough time to write between the gaps. It reeks of a show that was being rushed through major plot points. In the past seasons, we could go multiple episodes without seeing some of our main characters because everybody always had shit going on. So it took a lot of time to get through it all. In this season, they just started speed running through everything. The things that happen no longer ripple throughout the world. It feels like the show itself is desensitized to its own events, like they are just plot points that they have to hit, because they are. All of these guys die against the White Walkers, literally every single one of them. And then they're just back. Did they fucking respawn? This is like the opposite of the Duffer Brothers, where they just procrastinated and squandered all of the time Netflix gave them. D&D were offered more time and promised more seasons by HBO, and Martin even went on record saying that he thought that the finale would take 5 more seasons to get to. But they just decided not to take it. These guys probably saw the writing on the wall and decided to go with their original plan because they realized that they were not equipped to tell the story that they should have been telling. And so they released a half-baked final season. It's interesting because there are things here, if built up a little bit more, could have meant more and made more sense. The biggest one is Daenerys slaughtering all of the people in King's Landing with her big-ass dragon. The idea is sound. Throughout the entire series, she's a bit brutal in the way she deals with things, but she always has people to calm her down. They just didn't have enough time to make it make sense, and it's devastating. Rather than evaluating what the story and the TV show needed at the time, they decided to go with a plan that they had made 4 years prior and took a $200 million exclusivity deal with Netflix and left it all behind them. They said after the final season came out that they wanted to focus on building their own company. They said that it had simply become too complex for them to produce. HBO was going to give them as many seasons as it took to make this finale what it needed to be. And they said no. I wonder how they feel about that now. I'm sure nobody wants to speak badly about the professional relationships they had while working on Game of Thrones. Even though George R. R. Martin has gone on record saying that it's an unfaithful adaptation and it should have had more time, he's given them the benefit of the doubt with the medium that they were working with. I sort of disagree. I think they should have just spent more time on it. You don't get to ruin your show, your legacy, and just walk away from it unscathed because it was too complex for you. In a vacuum, the scene of Daenerys burning King's Landing, in my opinion, shows the end of a narrative arc that had been building up throughout the entire show. But the final steps that were needed to make it make as much sense as possible, to make it as satisfying of a climax as possible, were not there. It resembles a drastic drop-off instead of a satisfying conclusion. This is the greed, misallotment of time, and the general incompetence that ruined Game of Thrones. They could not make a satisfying conclusion for the show that they had been working on for a decade. I don't think D&D are bad guys, but they were in over their heads, and rather than buckling down and trying their hardest, they quit, and they left. In my opinion, they should have finished the job in the way that this story deserved. I rarely hear people talk about Game of Thrones anymore, and in the eyes of the fans, the legacy of its creators is one of leaving and abandoning a project for more money elsewhere. Time, money, writing, it was all mismanaged and resulted in a poor ending that people don't really remember. George, please finish the fucking book. Okay, so take as long as this video has been, double it, and that is probably still not as long as I could talk about what is constitutionally wrong with this show. The problems run so deep and are so integral to the core of this show that I can and have talked at length about how bad it is. It is fascinating how bad this show is. Good work, Netflix. I didn't know a show could make me this mad. In my opinion, this is the worst kind of ruining that can happen. A remake of something that completely misunderstands and bastardizes its source material. One that exists purely for monetary reasons, not as a different take on the story, truly wanting to explore something new, but simply as a spit in the face of the original piece of work. One that could not imagine being as good as its predecessor. It doesn't utilize its changes in good or constructive ways. It exists for little reason because the original show is already so good, dude. This is not just a remake, which is already a tough thing to get right, but it is the worst kind of remake. The type that is too focused on fan service to tell a good story while also thinking that removing joy from characters makes its story more intelligent and mature and interesting. Firstly, Avatar: The Last Airbender is possibly one of the best animated shows ever made. One of the best TV shows ever made. It is such a tightly connected and well-paced story with maybe one episode that I would consider skipping every time I rewatch it. Every part of this show is so goddamn good, man. The fighting is well choreographed and fun to watch. The characters are charming, and you actually get to actively watch them grow and change. The world is one of those worlds you wish you could have been born into. I want to be a bender so bad, dude. Let me shoot fire out of my hands, please! My sisters and I fell in love with this series when we were kids, and we rewatch it at least once every year. It's one of those shows that you can just throw on and everybody's gonna sit down on the couch enthralled. It doesn't matter which episode you're on, it doesn't matter what book you're on. Everybody is going to be locked in on the show. Hell, even my dad started to love this show. He's the kind of guy that talks through every single thing he watches, which is where I get it from. And even this guy is like, yes, I've gotta watch Appa and Momo get into some shenanigans. Anyway, I say all of that to convince you to go watch the show before I spoil it for you. Actually, you know what? It doesn't matter. Your enjoyment of the show is not going to be hindered by anything that I tell you. The show is just that good, which is why it's all the more breathtaking. that this remake is not a smash hit. They had all the pieces, dude. It is the exact opposite of what a polished turd is. It is a shitted gem. In the animated show, they spend a lot of time fleshing out the characters, their flaws, their motivations, their strengths, like a TV show does. Interestingly, the writers of the live-action show have decided to go with this new strategy where, instead of doing all that boring stuff, they'll just have husks of these characters move through iconic plot points of a much better show. Even though this remake is currently only 1 season long and a third of the length of the original show, it is hard to find just one example to show you guys, but I'm going to do it. This is because I respect your time, and also, if I get going, I'm never going to stop. The animated show has an episode called The Storm, which is one of my favorites of Book 1. Let me run you through it really quickly. This episode has 2 concurrent and similar plot lines playing out at the same time, both kickstarted by the same event, the possibility of a storm. That's why it's called that. I don't need to spell this out for you. At the start of the episode, Aang has a dream where the line, "We need you, Aang," is repeated while he relives the storm that got him stuck in the iceberg in the first place. Zuko's half of the plot starts when Iroh predicts that a storm will be coming, and that they'll need to steer clear of it for their own safety. Zuko says that their safety doesn't matter, and one of his crew members takes note of it. Later, he and the same crew member get into it because Iroh is right, considering the fact that the episode is called The Storm, and then Zuko challenges him to an Agni Kai. Meanwhile, Sokka decides to go fishing with some old dude because he also doesn't believe that there's going to be a storm, despite the fact that the episode is called The Storm. This is when we start following Katara and Aang. The old guy had told Aang that he abandoned the world, which caused him to run away, and after Katara catches up with him, he opens up about his past at the Southern Air Temple. He tells her about how he was told that he was the Avatar at just 12 years old, much earlier than the usual 16. His friends started to exclude him from their games, he was expected to train more, with his only refuse being his guardian, Monk Gyatso. We learned that the monks were planning on moving Aang away from the Southern Air Temple, away from his friends, and away from Gyatso. This is why Aang ran away. He was about to be taken away from everybody he loved, and tragically, he does this right before Gyatso was there to reassure him that he was not going to let that happen. There's so much anger in him when he tells this to Katara, and so much shame that he feels for abandoning his responsibility. He was scared, and because of that, he got stuck and frozen in that storm for 100 years. Under his goofy exterior and general carefree attitude, he's carrying the weight of his entire civilization being wiped out because he was not there, because he ran away. Zuko's backstory, told by Iroh under the deck of his ship, is similar in that it's about being ousted from your home, being betrayed by the people you love most. When he was younger, Zuko was sitting in on a war meeting with his father, the Fire Lord, and several Fire Nation generals. In this meeting, one of the generals proposes using a group of inexperienced and new recruits as decoys so the real forces could attack the Earth Kingdom from behind, essentially sacrificing the new recruits. Zuko speaks out about this being a betrayal towards these soldiers, and that their loyalty for the Fire Nation shouldn't be exploited this way. The Fire Lord reprimands Zuko for speaking out, stating that this act of complete disrespect could only be resolved with an Agni Kai, paralleling Zuko's fervency for the same resolution earlier, after a perceived disrespect from his crew member. What Zuko didn't understand at the time, though, is that this Agni Kai wouldn't be between himself and the general, but himself and his father. He refuses to fight him, and instead begs his father for mercy. He professes his loyalty, and he apologizes for speaking out of turn, for disrespecting him, and this only makes Ozai angrier. What he tells Zuko next is what he has lived by for the last 3 years of his life.
You will learn respect, and suffering will be your teacher.
This is how Zuko got his scar. His father burned it onto his face for refusing to fight him, and then he banished him, telling him he'd only be welcomed back if he captured the Avatar. It is a permanent and physical reminder that no matter what he does, he will never be at home with his father. Aang was 12 years old whenever he ran away from home, and Zuko was 13 when he was burned and banished. These two children have extremely similar and heartbreaking reasons for feeling the way that they feel. Aang's shame for abandoning the world, his grief for a culture that no longer exists, and the anger he felt whenever they were going to take him away from everything and everyone he knew. Zuko has so much shame for disrespecting his father, the Fire Nation, those generals, and the burn on his face is a permanent reminder of that. All he wants is to go home. The episode ends with Aang rescuing Sokka and the fisherman from the storm, confronting his fears and choosing not to run away anymore, to focus on the future, not the past. And Zuko, after saving one of the members of his crew, sees Appa fly through the storm, and when his newly trauma-dumped to by Iroh crew member asks him what he wants to do about it, he says that they shouldn't pursue, and instead should head for safer waters. This ending is so important because it shows us that even though Aang is carrying so much weight, he's going to continue moving forward as that goofy kid that everybody loves him for being. And it shows us that Zuko, even though he was banished and burned by his own father, he is still good at heart, and it gives us a glimpse into the incredible redemption that he's going to get in Book 3. All in all, it's a pretty damn good episode. Alright, now let's watch the live-action version of The Storm. So, there is no direct parallel in the live-action show for The Storm, although the two backstories are still shown to us. 5 episodes apart. Instead of us learning about Aang's backstory at an opportune moment where it can develop not only the character's relationship, but we learn more about him, it's told to us chronologically. In fact, it's one of the first scenes in the entire show, right after this guy gets his shit obliterated. While it's certainly a bad decision to do this, it's just one of the many bad decisions regarding Aang's backstory, which I'm going to bring up now in excruciating detail. I hope I've done a good job of illustrating the type of character Aang is in the cartoon. He's a fun-loving kid, he's goofy, he likes to go ride giant fish instead of training for, not ending the world, but he also carries so much shame and guilt for his responsibilities put on him when he was too young to deal with them. He's complex and severely hurt in so many ways. He's only 12 years old and he was forced to grow up because of the circumstances of the world and the war that rages on. This is an integral theme for the entire show. Almost every main character is a child that was forced to mature and adapt to their circumstances, and part of Aang's contribution to the wider group is that he allows them to be kids again. He reintroduces that silliness into their lives, whether it's doing stupid tricks or risking his life to impress a girl he likes. Aang in the live-action show is not this character. He doesn't act like the 12-year-old from the cartoon, and he doesn't even really act like a kid at all. He's constantly spouting sage wisdom and acting extremely calm when he shouldn't be, and most of the whimsical things he does in the show have been cut out, like the penguin sledding. He doesn't play games or have fun, he monologues at people until they can get to the next set piece or action scene. The biggest sin in how they've made this new Aang is that they've removed the reason for his guilt and shame. Aang didn't get scared when he was told that he was the Avatar. He didn't want to run away. Instead, he monologues to Appa, and then they go on the Avatar equivalent of a night drive around the neighborhood. That's when the storm happens, and that's when Aang disappears. I don't think I need to spell it out for you. They took away Aang's biggest mistake. This was one of the biggest reasons for his internal conflict with his guilt and his shame. It breaks the show. They keep recycling plot points from the original or tweaking them a little bit so they fit with this show without realizing that they don't fucking work because this Aang is not Aang. He's some kid with airbending tattoos who read too many new age spiritual books about how energy is balance and balance is energy. What are you talking about? I'm not exaggerating about this. This one little change dominoes over the entire show. Let me try and illustrate it for you. Boomy, in this version, is a mean-ass old man who hates Aang for being a fun, silly guy who ran away from responsibility, instead of being a silly old guy that teaches him to think outside the box and use his whimsy to his advantage. The change doesn't work because Aang isn't that and didn't do that. That's the original Aang. This one went for a drive on Appa and got obliterated by a Category 7 hurricane. He didn't run away. Eagle-eared viewers may have noticed that I said that Aang and Zuko's plots are no longer intertwined, juxtaposed with each other, showing that their destinies are linked, that they are meant for the same fate. Instead, Zuko's backstory is told by Iroh after he gets pissed with one of his crew members about how much Zuko has suffered, and you could never possibly suffer as much as Zuko has. This is not how Uncle Iroh should talk about Zuko. This is how a 12-year-old me talks about Shadow the Hedgehog. Zuko's backstory being told to us right before the episode where he breaks Aang out of prison is supposed to allow us to sympathize with him and understand he is a complex character, and it plants seeds for his redemption. To the live action show's credit, they do actually have the Blue Spirit section right after his backstory is told. But again, one change ruins the way that this backstory plays into the greater plot. Not only does it weaken Zuko's character, but it weakens his juxtaposition with Aang. Zuko fights back against his father. It seems like a small change, but it massively impacts the character that Zuko is supposed to be at this point. All he wants is his father's love. He's trying to profess his loyalty to him, and immediately begins apologizing after realizing it was him that he disrespected and not the general when he spoke out of turn. The scar on his face is a reminder that his father does not care about any of that. You will learn respect, and suffering will be your teacher. In this version, not only does Zuko fight back, but the reason he gets his scar is changed to the fact that Ozai was about to fucking lose and get his face burned off, and it was disrespectful to him for Zuko not to do that. What? Also, he doesn't say that metal fucking line.
Compassion is a sign of weakness.
This diminishes the cruelty Ozai should have displayed by burning his own son for talking out of turn. They sacrificed one of Zuko's most important character moments so they could make it a cool fight scene. And that, Guinos, is why The Storm is such a good example to use when conveying just how broken this show is. Ostensibly, this show exists to be a more mature retelling of the original, appealing to fans of Game of Thrones, according to the showrunner. In reality, it's been dumbed down and stripped of all personality, trading substance for spectacle. They change all of these things to seem more interesting and deep while actually making them more surface level and worse. This relationship Aang and Zuko both have with shame and being run out of their homes is supposed to be juxtaposed. They're both just kids who have been affected by war, and there's none of that here. Complicated themes are instead traded for flashy fight scenes and boring-ass monologues. I can see now how they were taking inspiration from Game of Thrones, although unfortunately, they picked the worst goddamn seasons to take inspiration from. Really quick, let's do a lightning round of a lot more problems I have with this show that I could talk about at length, but I won't because I don't want to make you listen to me talk for that long. Katara is no longer conflicted with being pushed into a parental role, and Aang doesn't really teach her how to be a kid again. She just magically learns waterbending instead of struggling with it for the entire season. She's also really not in the show at all. Sokka is no longer a flawed character that is misogynistic at first and needs to learn and grow to be a better person. Now he's just not a good warrior, which ruins Suki's character by making her just completely fucking enamored by him at first sight, and now their whole dynamic is that there's just so much sexual tension there. It's so weird. Oh my god, get a fucking room. The characters are treating each other, and the show is treating the characters like they're the ones from the original show, but they aren't. Nothing makes fucking sense if you haven't seen the original show, because these aren't the original characters. They keep introducing characters too early without understanding why they were introduced at the specific time that they were, because fan service is more important to the show than good storytelling. Look guys, it's the singing tunnel guy. Look guys, it's Azula and her friends. Look guys, it's Ozai, even though he's not supposed to be shown until book 3 to make him more menacing. It's Wan Shi Tong. More like Wan Shit Tong. Yeah. I don't want to make this video longer than it already is. I could talk more about how bad this show is, and maybe I will after book 2 releases, but I don't want to right now. I mean, look at this. This is embarrassing. Where are the dynamic poses? Why is everything so half-hearted and lazy? Where are the colors? Why does it look like that? This show wants to have its cake and eat it too. What I mean by that is that it wants to please fans of the original show while also justifying its own existence. The problem is that everything they change was integral to the story, and the things that they don't change don't make sense anymore because the characters are not the same characters. I don't know for sure why the original creators left the project, but if I had to guess, it would be a lack of respect for their original work. I'm seriously sorry that this is what happened to your work, guys. I know this can be done right because One Piece live action exists. In fact, it's what got me into One Piece in the first place. You can't help but smile when you watch it. It's so proud of what it is. People can appreciate the live action One Piece and become new fans from it. And I just can't see that happening with this boring ass excuse of a show. One Piece live action is not trying to be the next Game of Thrones. It's trying to be One Piece. That's the problem with Netflix Avatar and why I bring it up here. It doesn't seem like the showrunners really understand or appreciate what the original was even about. You can change things for an adaptation, but this is beyond that. This is just misunderstanding on another level. It's everything that I've been talking about throughout this entire video. Also, I just hate it a lot and I wanted an excuse to talk about it. It's my YouTube channel. I can do whatever I want. Like, end this section right now because I can't think of a segue. I think that television in general is one of the best modern art forms. Some of my favorite stories have come from TV, even if they're silly in premise and execution. For example, the show My Name is Earl is about a white trash dude living in a trailer park, discovering karma and making up for everything bad he's ever done in his life. And it manages to be extremely heartfelt and genuine at times, which makes it all the more frustrating that it was cancelled on a cliffhanger and it will never get a proper conclusion. And so while TV is one of the best forms of modern storytelling, it's also one of the riskiest. In some ways, a lot of the TV shows we have on now, whether that's streaming or actual television, although I'm not sure what shows are on actual television these days, are at risk of succumbing to these things that I've talked about. It's mainly greed, but there are also some high-profile cases of mismanagement, refusal to commit, or a disrespect and misunderstanding of source material. I know it's more complicated than that, but I feel like showrunners need to pay closer attention to the conclusions that they're going to be giving their shows if this is how they're going to turn out in the mainstream. And it's different for every show. I feel like Game of Thrones would have been remembered more fondly if it was given more time in the oven, and Stranger Things should have ended years ago, and it would have been a better show for it. And Netflix Avatar simply should not have been made. I have nothing nice to say about this show except for the fact that all the actors seem cool, and I'm jealous that they can do kung fu better than I can. And of course, while I was joking earlier, a lot of these problems do actually boil down to greed. Shareholders and executives want more money, and so if a show is done and over, well then let's just remake it, or let's create a spin-off that will bring in the same audience. And this sucks because TV can be really great. Shows need to respect the time and the attention of the people watching them, instead of the second screen method that Netflix has been going with. Executives need to stop meddling with creative decisions. And stop deliberately misleading people about your shows, the Duffer Brothers. Anyways, Guinos, you know what? No. The rest of this outro is up to interpretation. I didn't feel like writing it. Maybe in the next 20 years, I'll reveal the fate of my outro. Fuck off.
stepping at your, keep stepping at your own pace, step